On a crisp morning in the summer of 2014, a young Army reservist from Ontario arrived at Canadian Forces Base Meaford, a sprawling training ground carved from the remnants of old farmlands and scattered ruins in southern Ontario, a place where history whispered through every dilapidated stone farmhouse and forgotten cemetery. Meaford, once a bustling community of families and farms, had been claimed by the military decades ago, leaving behind eerie reminders of the past. And as he stepped off the transport vehicle, the weight of the legends surrounding the base pressed heavily on him, particularly the story of Meaford Mary, or Blue Eyes, a little girl who had perished in a well long before the Army took the land, her spirit said to roam the training grounds, a warning that even the most seasoned soldiers murmured about in hushed tones. And as the young reservist and his fellow recruits assembled for their initial briefing, the summer air carried a quiet tension, as though the ruins themselves held their breath, observing every movement. They were assigned to Land Force Central's DP-1 Infantry Development Period, tasked with learning the basics of living, fighting, and navigating the dense woods and open fields that sprawled across the base. And yet, despite the structured training exercises, stories of ghostly sightings and chilling voices circulated constantly, forming a strange camaraderie among the soldiers, who alternated between laughter and apprehension as they recounted the many encounters with Blue Eyes, tales ranging from fleeting glimpses of glowing blue eyes between the trees to the unmistakable sound of a child's voice calling for help in the dead of night, a sound that sent shivers down the spine of even the most hardened infantryman. That first night, as the recruits settled into their assigned posts for guard duty, the windless darkness pressing against them, the young reservist couldn't help but notice the weight of silence that enveloped the base, punctuated only by the distant rustle of leaves and the faint creaking of old structures. And when he scanned the tree line with his flashlight, there it was, a pair of luminous blue eyes, eerily floating among the trees, moving slowly but with intent, bobbing as if walking, yet making no sound, the chilling phenomenon rendering him frozen, every instinct screaming to flee, yet curiosity rooting him in place, until a soft, pitiful voice called out, "Help me, please," from somewhere deep within the forest. The voice was unmistakably that of a small child, carrying an urgency and sorrow that seemed to pierce the very air around him. And in that moment, he understood why every soldier he had met had spoken of Meaford Mary with a mixture of fear, respect, and disbelief. For the legend was not merely a ghost story, but a living presence, capable of unnerving even the most disciplined. And as the night wore on, his imagination collided with the reality of what he saw, questioning whether the apparition was a trick of the mind, a hallucination born of fatigue and anxiety, or the actual spirit of a child who had met a tragic end over a century ago, her story forever etched into the grounds where soldiers trained, her eyes still blue, still searching, still calling, compelling him and others to learn, adapt, and survive not only the rigorous physical demands of military training, but also the psychological shadow that haunted every corner of Meaford, where history, tragedy, and the supernatural intertwined, leaving an indelible mark on every soldier who dared to walk its woods after dark. The first night on watch at CFB Meaford was unlike anything the young reservist had imagined. The summer air was still, almost unnaturally so, and the forest seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for something to emerge from the shadows. And as he settled into his assigned 6 o'clock position near one of the base's many forgotten graveyards, the weight of isolation pressed down on him. The other soldiers asleep in distant trenches, while he and a fellow recruit maintained a silent vigil, scanning the dense darkness for any sign of movement, each creaking branch or rustle of leaves amplifying the fear and tension that coursed through him. And he recalled the whispered stories of Meaford Mary, the girl whose spirit had haunted these grounds for over a century, her glowing blue eyes said to appear suddenly among the trees, her plaintive cries echoing through the night, luring unsuspecting soldiers closer to the well where she had died. A cautionary tale repeated with a mix of amusement and dread among the seasoned troops, Yet as he stared into the blackness, he began to understand that the story was far more than legend. For there, about 20 yards away, 2 points of electric blue light bobbed rhythmically, moving through the trees with an unnatural silence, the glow growing steadily as they turned toward his position, eyes fixed upon him with an intensity that froze him in place. And then the voice came, soft yet distinct, a child's cry for help, cutting through the eerie stillness. "Help me! Help me!" it pleaded, sending a chill down his spine and tightening his chest as adrenaline surged through his veins. And though his rational mind argued it must be some trick, a prank by upperclassmen, or even the fatigue-induced hallucination that plagued so many recruits, every fiber of his being screamed that this was real, that the legend of blue eyes had manifested before him in its purest, most terrifying form, compelling him and his companion to remain absolutely still, every sound from the base distant and muted, as if the forest itself had swallowed the world beyond. And the apparition moved closer, bobbing like a child walking, yet making no sound, the very air seeming to hum, with a supernatural energy that made his hair stand on end. And when the glow suddenly vanished, leaving only the dense shadows and his pounding heart, he realized with dawning horror that the tales of soldiers falling victim to curiosity were no exaggeration. For just moments ago, he had been face to face with the unknown, and the thought of what might have awaited anyone foolish enough to approach the glowing eyes made the cold night feel even more suffocating. The trees now oppressive sentinels, their twisted branches casting skeletal shadows across the forest floor. And as he whispered a shaky laugh to his fellow soldier, convincing himself it was all in their minds, the memory of the child's voice lingered, echoing with a haunting insistence, forcing him to confront the stark reality that the training grounds were more than an army exercise area. They were a liminal space where past tragedy and present reality intersected, where history left its mark not only in crumbling ruins and abandoned cemeteries, but also in the spectral traces of a young girl's unfinished story. And as he finally returned to the barracks in the dim pre-dawn light, he could not shake the feeling of being watched, an invisible presence trailing him through every shadow. A constant reminder that Meaford Mary was not merely a ghost of legend, but a sentinel of sorrow, and that no soldier, no matter how well trained, could ever truly leave the woods of Meaford behind, for the eyes and cries of the past would follow, haunting dreams and waking thoughts alike, shaping their perception of courage, fear, and the thin veil separating the living from those trapped in the echoes of tragedy. As the young reservist settled into the rhythm of life at CFB Meaford, the legend of Meaford Mary transformed from a whispered story into a palpable, nerve-wracking reality, especially during night training exercises when dense fog would roll in over the open fields and ruins, swallowing the familiar landmarks and turning the sprawling base into a labyrinth of shadows and uncertainty. It was during one of these exercises, a full-night land navigation course, that he and 3 fellow soldiers found themselves separated from the rest of their unit, moving cautiously through the fog-bound landscape, the glow of their NVGs cutting dim circles through the gray-white haze, yet revealing nothing familiar, only twisted trees, broken stone walls, and gravestones half buried by time. And as they trudged forward, the silence became oppressive, each crunch of footsteps sounding unnaturally loud, each distant howl of wildlife triggering jumpy reactions, until a faint, desperate cry pierced the night, soft yet unmistakable, a little girl calling, "Help me, please help me." A voice so hauntingly real that it made their blood run cold and hearts pound in unison. And instinctively, they froze, scanning the foggy terrain for any sign of her, their maps and compasses suddenly insufficient against the overwhelming sensation of being watched, as though the very land itself conspired to disorient them. The 4 soldiers cautiously moved toward the sound, rationalizing that it must be another recruit playing a prank. Yet as they approached the approximate area, shapes emerged from the fog, glimmering blue lights bobbing rhythmically like eyes floating through the woods, moving silently, guiding them inexorably toward a location they could not yet identify. The eerie luminescence contrasting sharply with the gray fog and casting ghostly reflections on their NVG lenses, and every instinct screamed to retreat, but curiosity and military conditioning compelled them forward, aware of the tales of men lost to the mysterious well of Meaford Range, soldiers who had vanished while following the spirit, only to be found hours later trembling beside the historic pit, the ultimate convergence of training, legend, and supernatural warning. And as they neared the trees, the glow suddenly vanished, leaving only the fog and the echoing remnants of the girl's voice, a sound that clung to the mist like a tangible presence, sending an icy shiver through their spines. In the aftermath, the soldiers recounted the events with trembling precision, noting the silence that had enveloped the area, the lack of wind or rustling leaves, as if nature itself had paused in acknowledgement of the ghostly visitor. And as they regrouped, hearts still racing, the weight of the stories shared by veterans of Meaford became undeniable, each tale corroborating the others with eerie consistency. A little girl with glowing blue eyes, a voice pleading for help, and the inexorable pull toward the well where she had met her tragic end decades before. And in those moments, the young reservist understood that Meaford Range was not simply a specter of imagination, but an enduring imprint of sorrow and warning, her presence woven into the fabric of the base, challenging each soldier's courage, perception, and belief, transforming the simple task of land navigation into a confrontation with history, grief, and the supernatural. And even as the fog began to lift with the approach of dawn, the chilling memory of glowing eyes moving silently through the trees lingered, an indelible mark on the psyche of those who had witnessed it, a haunting reminder that some places are forever imprinted by the souls who once lived and died there. And that courage in Meaford was measured not just in physical endurance or skill, but in the ability to face the inexplicable, to navigate both the terrain and the shadowy veil between life and the restless spirits that dwell among the ruins and gravestones, watching, waiting, and occasionally guiding the unwary toward lessons learned the hard way. The days at CFB Meaford were grueling, filled with endless drills, tactical exercises, and sleep deprivation that left the young reservist and his fellow soldiers teetering between exhaustion and heightened alertness. But it was during the night exercises that the base revealed its true, unsettling character, particularly when the recruits were assigned to man trenches near the mock training town, where the open field stretched toward dense forests dotted with ruined homesteads and abandoned gravestones. And on one such night, the reservist found himself in the furthest left trench, operating a machine gun alongside two other soldiers, taking turns sleeping and maintaining watch while the cold air bit at their skin and the distant fog clung to the landscape like a living thing. And as he periodically scanned the road and the terrain ahead with night vision goggles, a strange figure appeared, a little girl running along the gravel path from the left, moving with an unnatural speed and fluidity, her long dark hair and white dress illuminated dimly by the NVGs. And then, as if the light of the goggles had betrayed her true form, her eyes glowed an intense, almost electric blue, cutting through the night with an otherworldly brilliance. And though the reservist questioned his own perception, dismissing it at first as a trick of fatigue or imagination, the figure stopped abruptly, turned, and ran back the other way, a movement so precise and impossibly swift that it defied natural explanation. And as he whispered to his buddy about what he had seen, laughter attempted to mask the disbelief, yet neither could deny the intensity of the experience, for the haunting stories of Meaford Range had suddenly taken on a terrifying immediacy, the girl's presence tangible and oppressive, leaving an indelible impression on their minds. And as they watched the shadows where she had vanished, the echo of her faint, plaintive voice lingered, a chilling reminder of the countless soldiers who had encountered her over the decades, some of whom had been drawn dangerously close to the old well where she had perished. And the realization settled heavily upon them that Meaford Range was not merely a legend to scare new recruits, but an enduring, active presence that could manipulate perception, instill fear, and command attention even in the midst of rigorous military operations. And as they continued their night watch, scanning the tree line and ruins for any further signs, each crackling branch and shifting shadow amplified the tension, for the forest seemed alive, almost sentient, responding to their awareness with subtle, almost imperceptible movements, while their minds struggled to reconcile the physical demands of their trench duties with the surreal, supernatural encounter, creating a heightened state of alertness and dread that permeated every action, every whispered conversation, and every heartbeat. And by the end of the exercise, the young reservist understood that survival at Meaford required more than skill with weapons or tactical knowledge. It demanded an acknowledgement of the land's haunted history, an understanding that the past and the present coexisted in an uneasy truce, and that the stories of glowing blue eyes, plaintive cries, and ghostly apparitions were far more than mere folklore. They were warnings, tests of courage, and lessons in humility, forcing every soldier who walked the trenches, manned the machine guns, or navigated the fog-laden fields to confront the thin, terrifying line between reality and legend, life and death, and human perception versus the supernatural, a line that Meaford Mary had patrolled for over a century, teaching patience, respect, and vigilance to all who dared to meet her gaze, and leaving in her wake a chilling, unforgettable imprint on the souls of those who survived the night. By the fifth night at CFB Meaford, the young reservist had become all too aware that the base was not just a military training ground, but a place steeped in sorrowful history, where every ruined farmhouse, overgrown cemetery, and abandoned road seemed to whisper the story of Meaford Mary, the little girl who had tragically fallen into a well in the late 1800s and whose spirit continued to roam the woods. Her glowing blue eyes and plaintive cries a warning to those who might venture too close. And on this night, during a land navigation exercise that led the soldiers through the fog-choked forest, he and a small patrol found themselves near one of the infamous wells, now filled with concrete and surrounded by a rusting chain-link fence. Yet the weight of legend made it feel as if the pit was still open, ready to claim anyone who ignored the cautionary tales. The patrol moved cautiously, each soldier scanning the shadows with NVGs, every footstep amplified by the eerie silence, and the fog hung low, swirling like a living entity, while faint whispers of children's voices seemed to echo through the trees, testing their resolve. And then, without warning, a pale figure appeared in the distance. A small girl in a white Victorian-style dress, her eyes glowing an unearthly blue, moving with a speed and grace that defied human possibility, stopping only to turn and stare at them, her gaze simultaneously haunting and sorrowful. And as the reservist froze, memories of previous stories flashed through his mind. Soldiers falling out of patrol formations, others drawn perilously close to the well, all unable to resist the spectral summons. The legend of Meaford Mary proving itself real again, a tangible presence that manipulated the senses and challenged courage, demanding vigilance and restraint. The patrol commander barked orders to ignore the apparition. Yet the air seemed to thicken with a supernatural intensity, the fog swirling around the figure as if obeying her presence. Shadows stretching and contracting in ways that defied natural physics. And the sense of being watched was overwhelming, pressing down on each soldier with the weight of decades of accumulated fear, curiosity, and grief. And as the girl moved back into the trees, the echoes of her cries lingered like a spectral thread pulling at the minds of the men, leaving a lingering dread that no amount of training could dispel. And the reservist realized that the well itself, a simple structure in physical terms, had become a symbol, a nexus where past tragedy, supernatural folklore, and the psychological strain of military training converged, testing not only skill but the limits of human perception and courage, and that any misstep, any moment of hesitation, could result in a loss of composure or even physical danger, as history had shown. By the end of the exercise, the patrol had returned to the barracks, hearts still pounding, minds racing with the indelible vision of the glowing eyes, the haunting voice, and the proximity of the legendary well. And the young reservist understood fully that Meaford Mary was more than a story told to new recruits. She was a sentinel of the past, a guardian of the haunted spaces between life and death, whose presence demanded respect, caution, and awe, and who, through her persistent appearances, ensured that every soldier who walked the base would carry the memory of that night forever, etched into their consciousness as a chilling reminder of how history, tragedy, and the unexplained could intersect in a single, unforgettable encounter that tested not only their bodies, but their very understanding of reality, courage, and the unseen forces that linger in the shadows of CFB Meaford. As the weeks at CFB Meaford passed, the young reservist began to notice a shift in the atmosphere of the base. The ruins, gravestones, and dense forest that once seemed merely historical or eerie now felt alive with intent, as if the spirits of the past were observing every movement, and no training exercise, patrol, or night watch could fully prepare anyone for the unnerving encounters that had become almost routine among the soldiers, particularly the recurring appearances of Meaford Mary, little girl with glowing blue eyes whose tragic death in a long-forgotten well had cemented her as the spectral guardian of the area. And it was during a defensive exercise in Hogsback sector, a week-long operation involving sleep deprivation, simulated combat, and constant vigilance, that the reservist and a few others experienced an encounter that would forever alter their perception of reality. Armed with NVGs and assigned to trenches overlooking a mock training town, they observed strange movements in the fog-laden fields, white, human-shaped forms that appeared without warning, walking deliberately yet without any of the sound one would expect from human movement, figures too distant to discern gender or identity, yet unmistakably not in army gear. And their presence alone made the air feel heavier, the temperature dropping perceptibly, causing goosebumps to rise on every exposed surface of skin, while a soft, desperate cry floated through the night, unmistakably a child, calling for help, its source impossible to locate yet unrelentingly clear, sending shivers down spines and freezing legs, a reminder that Meaford Mary's legacy was both psychological and spectral, a combination of folklore, history, and supernatural force designed to test the nerve of all who dare to cross her path, as the soldiers moved cautiously through the ruins, avoiding the well and other historically significant sites. They experienced the unnerving sensation of being watched, every shadow seemingly stretching toward them, every tree branch bending subtly as if following their movements, and the fog thickened, rolling in unnatural patterns that obscured familiar terrain, turning the mundane act of reconnaissance into a test of mental fortitude, patience, and courage. And though they followed military protocols, using maps, compasses, and land navigation techniques, the reality of the supernatural presence rendered such tools almost useless, for the ground itself seemed deceptive, shifting under the weight of history and haunting. And as the night deepened, the soldiers shared whispered conversations, debating whether what they saw was hallucination, fatigue, or a genuine encounter with the spirit of a girl lost to time. Yet each appearance of glowing eyes, each plaintive cry, each fleeting silhouette confirmed the unshakable truth. Meaford Mary was real, her essence woven into the very fabric of the base, her sorrow and tragedy manifesting as a persistent, disorienting, and terrifying presence. And by the end of the exercise, every soldier had internalized a profound lesson. Caution, respect, and awareness were paramount, for Meaford Mary did not merely haunt the grounds. She tested the resolve of those who walked them, challenging their understanding of fear, courage, and the unseen, and leaving behind an indelible imprint on their minds. A reminder that even in the age of technology, training, and strategy, some forces, born from history, tragedy, and the inexplicable, remain untamed, unexplainable, and eternally present, and that the haunting of CFB Meaford would continue to shape the psyche of every soldier who dared to venture into its foggy, shadowed forests, reminding them that in the intersection of the living and the spectral, vigilance and respect were the only means of survival, and that the blue eyes of a little girl lost over a century ago would forever watch, wait, and challenge every soul who dared to walk the haunted ground. She now called home. By the final week of training at CFB Meaford, the young reservist had come to understand that the base was more than a military installation. It was a living testament to history, tragedy, and the unexplained, where every ruin, gravestone, and fog-laden path told the story of lives once lived and lost, and nowhere was this more evident than in the continued presence of Meaford Mary, the little girl whose spirit had endured for over a century, haunting the grounds with her glowing blue eyes and plaintive cries, a spectral sentinel warning against hubris and carelessness. And it was during a late-night defensive patrol, under a thick canopy of mist and the dim glow of NVGs, that the reservist and his comrades experienced yet another chilling encounter that would forever be etched in their memories, as they navigated the undulating terrain toward a series of grid points, each step taking them deeper into the fog, deeper into the haunted past, where every sound and shadow seemed amplified, every rustle of leaves or distant howl magnified into a potential threat. And then, out of the oppressive gray, a figure emerged, small, human-shaped, gliding across the field with the silence of death, her white dress shimmering faintly in the NVG glow, her eyes piercing electric blue, unmistakable and hypnotic, commanding attention without a word. And as they froze in a mixture of fear and awe, the little girl's voice drifted through the night, soft yet insistent, crying, "Help me," echoing over open fields, through tree lines, and into their very souls, making clear that this was no ordinary specter, but a spirit tied to history, to the tragic events of a century ago, whose presence now served as both a warning and a test, challenging their courage, their sanity, and their ability to distinguish between reality and the supernatural. And as they cautiously maneuvered, the fog seemed to part around her movements, guiding them subtly toward the location of the old well, now fenced and filled with concrete, yet imbued with the same oppressive energy that had claimed the attention of countless soldiers before them. And each step forward carried the weight of centuries, the accumulated fear, stories, and legend pressing against their minds like a tangible force, forcing them to respect the power of memory, grief, and the unexplained. And in that moment, the reservist realized that Meaford Mary's legacy was not simply a tale for new recruits, but a living lesson, embedded in the land itself. That history leaves marks not just in stone and soil, but in the echoes of lost lives, the impressions of fear and sorrow that linger, shaping perception and instilling caution in all who dare tread the haunted grounds. And as dawn finally approached, casting weak light through the dissipating fog, the soldiers returned to the barracks, hearts pounding and minds racing, aware that Meaford Mary's presence would remain with them forever, in dreams, in recollections, in the silent moments when the wind through trees or the shifting of shadows would recall the memory of glowing eyes, desperate cries, and the tragic innocence lost long ago. And though they would complete their training, earn their marks, and leave the base physically intact, the psychological imprint of the experience, the encounters, the fear, the respect for a force both human and supernatural, would endure, a reminder that some lessons can only be learned in the intersection of history, tragedy, and the unknown, and that the blue eyes of Meaford Mary would continue to watch over the base, eternally haunting, eternally warning, ensuring that every soldier who walked the foggy fields of southern Ontario would carry with them a story, a caution, and a memory that would never fade, a story that transcends time, blending the horrors of war, the weight of history, and the chilling reality of the supernatural into a legacy no soldier could forget.